So tell me what's new with Wejo. What have you been up to?
Well, do you know what I was thinking about before? About the first time we met was 2014 at one of the at a track event, and you probably saw me walking up and down the car park. And I was trying to build relationships with motor manufacturers, OEMs as they're called.
Okay.
So like 6 years later, we now have relationships with most motor manufacturers globally. We have a supply base of 50 million cars where we receive live data from cars. So any one day we get 10 million cars sending us data in real time. So we see 7% of all vehicles moving around New York, 20% in Detroit. So
Whoa,
we're getting
okay.
huge amounts of data coming from cars, and we're helping cities, most manufacturers reduce emission, reduce congestion, reduce accidents on the road. We just machine learn every lane of every highway in America, where we now can preempt or predict as to whether there's a crash ahead or whether there's temporary construction work. And we're then advising DOTs, Departments of Transport, to change signage to direct cars off the road to avoid, say, accidents ahead. So it's amazing to think that 6 years ago, you and I just saw each other, and now we've become the global market leader for connected vehicle data.
I think it's very, very exciting. And I heard as well recently, particularly out here in Texas, with the rather bizarre weather that kicked off this year, all of the cars feeding back different kinds of data that, again, goes into helping with all of that.
Yeah, so we get weather data from 150,000 vehicles. So we know in real time. So you can imagine having a weather node moving around. So we know temperatures outside, we know the severity of rain, we know black ice conditions, we know the level of snow, and we're sharing that back with government agencies to help them sort of help traffic and reduce fatalities and reduce accidents. So it's the whole idea of connected vehicle data is one of data for good, really. That's how most manufacturers want to see it. They want to see that they're helping drivers have a better experience in the car.
So what's in store for Wejo then in the future, in the coming months and years?
Well, so the big thing is how cars are going to become more reliant on data. So, for example, we're working with one motor manufacturer to find parking spaces quicker. So we're scanning curbside availability from a pool of cars. So we see a free parking space, then that data sort of is generated as an insight in our cloud, and we then share it back with other cars in the area, so you can just park quicker. But the future is when you can put your car in valet mode, it'll then drive off, and other cars in the area will tell that car where to park. So it's happening. It's started to happen. This new generation of connected vehicles is starting to really embrace the value of data.
I think it's amazing to think what that means as the end user as well, because I know, we're talking here the simplicity of enabling a car to go find a parking space, but it's also more than that, isn't it, as well? It's things that you could purchase in car, or your insurance can be connected to it, to where you're driving and how you're doing things. There must be other things as well on top of that.
Yeah, so insurance is an interesting one, and it's up to the consumer to decide whether they want to share their data or not. And so this whole sort of mantra of data for good, most manufacturers aren't just going to share your data with an insurer, but if you want to get a reduced premium, and what we're learning with insurers is that they're now providing cheaper premiums to all profiles of drivers, young, old, high risk cars, more general cars. What most manufacturers are doing is they're saying that we want to provide better insurance for all their drivers. We're launching insurance products as far afield as the US to in Japan, as we were discussing before.
Okay, that's very interesting. And also, I guess, finding any potential issues with the car, the data that's being gathered from the car itself can help with both roadside incidents, but also with annual maintenance, servicing, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we're doing preemptive roadside assistance, and we're doing remote diagnostics as well. So we get diagnostic codes from the car, but we're also preempting and seeing parts failures or predicting parts failures. So when the car does go to the roadside and it needs assistance, then we've already informed the recovery vehicle where the car is and what the potential fault is, and if a part can be delivered for the car to be repaired quicker. And those are some of the benefits of connected vehicle data, is having this live data. We get data from over 150 sensors in the car, in a live environment, but we also get things like engine temperature. We know suspension height, so we're identifying potholes in roads. We're getting a whole array of information out of these cars.
So that's fascinating, actually, to think of. You talked about how all the data can help with road management effectively, but feeding back that suspension from multiple vehicles goes through a pothole on the same part of the road. To think about how that can connect with instantly communicating that back to the local council or whatever it might be, to get that data. That's an extraordinary look into the future that Wejo is already bringing.
Yeah, and the accuracy of connected vehicle data is 3 meters. So but if you've got enough vehicles, so I was looking at some data last week, and on 3 highways that cross over in LA, we received data from 153,000 vehicles in one 24-hour period. So we got this incredible sort of critical mass of data, which translates to 6% of all vehicles on that road. So we can then identify exactly where there are issues with the road, and we can help the DOT repair the road quicker, which then reduces the cost of repairing vehicles, reduces the costs to the Department of Transport. So it's a real sort of great example of data for good about what data in the car can mean.
And already at the moment, you mentioned, I think, 10 million cars on the road gathering or connected with data at the moment. How does that translate into a quantity of data? Kind of how many data points do you gather from that?
So we collect 350 million miles a day of data, 12 billion data points, 400,000 data points a second. So we can now track a city. So we see vehicles on 95% of roads every day in the US. And we can see emission clouds moving around cities. We can see number of occupants. We can see speed of vehicle, weight of vehicles. So we can help a city understand how their roads are being treated and how they should be configured. So it's an incredible amount of data.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how it feels almost, a decade or two ago playing a computer game where you can plan how a city's going to look. And this way you can completely optimize absolutely everything based on what is really happening. There's no speculation of, oh, maybe the traffic is flowing this way. The data doesn't lie. The data tells you exactly what's going on.
Yeah, we've helped cities advise on sports days. So when a game is ending, a football match, so we're then showing change traffic lights to green for 15 minutes, empty the stadium car park. So we're helping sort of make cities be more efficient and actually just get congestion out of the city, get emissions out of the city. Just make the city be more efficient and actually just have more green air, more blue air even.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to think about how that shapes up, because I suppose the future of cars is going through a significant change from the combustion engine era that we've had up to this point towards this more electric, more autonomous future, and how all of that, I suppose, can tie in. Because I think over the last maybe decade or so, a lot of the focus has been in the EV world, on the cars themselves working these things out, rather than being connected to this central data information source that can link back and help them even more. And I suppose as more and more cars are on the road that are connected, there's going to be even more data, even more understanding of what's going on. How do you see that side of things in terms of what we're driving shaping up?
Well, so on the EV side, there's two elements to it. So battery performance has still got a lot of learnings. So a battery in Alaska is going to perform different to a battery in Texas. There's going to be, and there could be a 30, 40, 50% performance degradation. So we're helping OEMs where we get data from hundreds of thousands of batteries every day. We're helping them understand the battery performance so they can make the cars be more efficient and operate differently in different sort of areas depending on weather. So the overlay of, we know the weather in real time, we know the battery performance in real time, combining that together, motor manufacturers have never seen that type of data before. So that's one side. The other side is we're also now seeing where cars are parking during the day that need to be charged. So we know the battery level and we know where they're parking. So we're helping EVs and EV installers know where to put charging points. So which is going to be a big infrastructure savings. So rather than just sort of having a blanket assumption where you need to have huge investments of hundreds of charging points in one area, we're helping optimize on a point-by-point basis where charging points should be installed to have the most effective sort of utilization.
I find this absolutely fascinating because obviously there's a lot of, I suppose, comparison from the world of petrol heads, where I certainly fall, thinking about the equivalence from how often you're at a fuel or gas pump to how often you need to charge up your EV. But you have all of that exact data of how frequently and how fueling versus charging fits into people's lives. And I guess even in, as you mentioned, the difference between Alaska and Texas, you can even see in different areas how different people use EVs and how frequently they'll charge them up and top them up and where they'll do it. And
but we also see with petrol heads on a Sunday morning as to how many times how fast they drive their cars and how much fuel they need to use on a Sunday morning and how much they leave in the tank during the week. But in terms of EV infrastructure, it's going to be really important in terms of the state-by-state regulation, making the EVs more and more important. It's going to be important to know where to install infrastructure effectively, and that's where we're helping, so that drivers can have more comfort about getting rid of this idea of range anxiety.
Yeah. So how does it work with the anonymity of data and all of this side of things?
So all data is anonymized, so it's metadata, unless the consumer says they're happy for their insurer to have access to the data. So we just supply trends of data. So it's our job to make sure the data is anonymized. So we don't ever supply one-to-one data to any company unless you, the consumer, say, yeah, I'm happy for it to go to my insurer to get a discounted insurance, or I'm happy for it to go to my fuel company to get a discount on fueling. One of the products we're doing is frictionless payments, where you can get frictionless parking, fueling and tolling. That's where you need to supply your information. But another example where it's purely about your car knowing where to park quicker, that's just metadata. That's anonymized data. That doesn't need to have any sort of personal information appended to it, and we don't pass that information on.
So one thing you just mentioned I found quite interesting is the tolling side of things. Now I can tell you from my experience so far of doing a road trip across the United States is that you have a lot of different toll systems and structures between different states, whether you're on a toll road in Orange County, California, or you're trying to work out the Sun Pass in Florida, or a number of different things for the high occupancy vehicle or express lanes that you have across the country. So I suppose by doing this and enabling a future of in-car purchases, it will allow the car to effectively know where you've been to bring these together. Because for me, it's an absolute nightmare with everything that then comes through the mail, told by mail a little bit later on. It'd be much more efficient to have this right now already in my car to make the journey a little smoother.
And that's exactly what our job is to do, is to sort of, that there is fragmented approaches to technology, whether it's tolling, whether it's parking, whether it's sort of state-by-state attitudes to highway configurations. What we do is we standardize the data from multiple motor manufacturers, and we standardize the output. So we find an efficient way using data to make your experience better in your car.
Well, it sounds absolutely fantastic to me. Looking forward to the future of how this is going to tie in, and the obvious benefits to both the end user, to local authorities, to just the whole experience really of going about the day-to-day driving side of things. It's just the start of the future.
Yeah,
just so I can imagine. It sounds very, very exciting. Well, fantastic to catch up. Thank you very much for your time. I'm excited to see the direction that Wejo is going, and how this is going to have this real world impact. I think it's very, very, very exciting.
I'm looking forward to this drag race.
Yes, coming very soon.
Looking forward to it. Well, thank you for your time, Tim.
Pleasure.